Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. How are we all getting on? How is the form? We are here to review the weekend's All-Ireland Senior Football Championship action and the Tailteann Cup final, of course, as well, which took place at the weekend. Plenty of talking points, plenty of discussions, plenty of things to break down. Both Donegal and Kerry booked their place into the All-Ireland Senior Football final. And, of course, Kildare ran out winners in the Tailteann Cup as well, joined by Seamus Brady from Monclea to run through the games. Seamus, I suppose in the end, maybe not the most. I thought the games were entertaining. Well, not entertaining in terms of competitiveness, but look, we saw some great scores. We saw some great football. They're certainly better than games I can think in previous years. But overall, in terms of a competitiveness, aside from the Tailteann Cup final, maybe a little bit disappointing that we didn't get two rip-roaring games or two games that were closer. I think we thought, look, I think a lot of people did think Kerry and Donegal would win. A majority of the people predicted both of those two sides to win, but I don't think we thought it would be as one-sided as they were.
Yeah, I think when you look at, coming into the build-up and everything like that, you'd seen Meath beat Dublin, beat Galway, beat Kerry, and I know that GA maths doesn't always add up, but you had a fairly decent idea in your head that Meath are at least going to put it up to Donegal. They're going to blow you up their nose. Jordan Morris, Owen Frayne, these lads are going to do damage inside, and Donegal will probably still get over the line because of the firepower that they have on the starting team, but also on the bench with lads like McBrearty coming in. But you figured that it was probably going to be Donegal and Kerry, but that it was going to be far from easy. And especially in the second halves, both teams as well had similar styles in how they carried out the victory. And as in the first half in both games was relatively competitive. And then in the third quarter, both Kerry and Donegal just went to town. Like you have Donegal hammering in the 3 goals. Kerry hit 9 points in a row at one stage as well. David Clifford hit 1-9 as a personal tally. And by the final quarter in both All-Ireland semi-finals, the jig was up. You knew who was going to go through to the All-Ireland final. And that's slightly underwhelming. And I suppose it's, what makes sport what it is that you can build up the game as much as you can. And, the fans travelled in droves, outrageously good crowd for the semi-final on Sunday between Meath and Donegal, two teams that are hugely well supported, and Kerry and Tyrone was a very healthy crowd there on the Saturday as well. And going into the final quarter, especially in the Meath Donegal game, you could hear a pin drop in Croke Park. But hopefully that doesn't happen in the final. I don't think it will. I think it genuinely is two of the two best teams in the country right now. Kerry and Donegal are in the final. So yeah, it doesn't have that feeling of, when a team wins a clearly more strong semi-final to the other team, and you realize that probably isn't going to be the hardest test to finish the job off. This will be Kerry's most difficult test of the season, and this will be Donegal's most difficult test of the season. So yeah, in terms of competitiveness, we didn't get that level, obviously, with the Tailteann Cup final being the exception. But in terms of the entertainment and the skills levels that we saw and the performance levels that we saw some outrageously good Gaelic football on display.
Yeah, absolutely, we did. And I think overall, look, when the draw was being made, we knew that Meath and Kerry couldn't play each other, so there was a potential that we could have seen Tyrone, Meath and Donegal Kerry. And whilst Donegal Kerry in an All-Ireland semi-final would have been blockbuster, would have been incredible, we could have potentially then had a very one-sided final. Now, I know an All-Ireland final, the occasion and everything else, it can, maybe Tyrone play a lot better, maybe Meath play a lot better in an All-Ireland final because of the nature of the game and everything else. So I think overall, look, I think we have got the best final in the end. And yeah, as you said, David Clifford was absolutely phenomenal, and we're certainly going to get onto him a little bit later on. Peter says here, two poor one-sided semis, purely functional business to get the golden ticket to the final. Clifford's feet, the highlight, not his actual feet, but I get what you mean. Jordan says here, hello there, Jordan Kearns here from Mayo. Classic game between Donegal versus Kerry in the All-Ireland Gaelic Senior Final. Donegal to win by 3 points. Jimmy's winning matches. Absolutely. I think everyone in Dublin will be singing that song in the build-up to the final, no doubt about it. I think they were probably singing it from Saturday evening, to be honest with you. Once we knew that Kerry were beating Tyrone. Keane says the two best teams have reached the All-Ireland final at the outset. I predicted Donegal to win it, and even though David Clifford has been on for. I still expect Donegal to win Sam once again. Yeah, like I think like at the start of the year, we were all kind of saying, you know, like it was very even between a lot of the top teams. But I think the narrative throughout maybe sort of the league and the championship was that it's probably like a top four, maybe you would say. And you had Donegal and Kerry in it. You probably had Armagh and Galway in it. But Galway haven't hit the heights this year. Armagh obviously got caught versus Kerry. Still think both Armagh and Galway are very, very good sides. I think, you know, Galway just got caught, maybe a couple of injuries there, just a little bit off it this year. And Armagh just got caught cold against Kerry. Probably weren't expecting them to be that good. So have we ended up with the best two teams in the final, do you think?
Yes, I do believe that. I think, again, going back to Keane's comment, I was the same. I said at the start of the year that I thought that Donegal were going to win the All Ireland this year. But as the year went on, there were stages where I wasn't as confident in the prediction. Liam has said Kerry as well. So and we both of us picked Cork, so we figured that out on my pod there last night. I said we're only 2 games away from being entirely correct, like in terms of the men's All Ireland champions. I said Donegal and Cork at the start of the year, and we're 2 games away from that being the case. And Liam has picked Cork and Kerry. So we're hoping for different results in the football final in order to get that result, and obviously Cork, if they can get the job done against Tipperary. And look, the reality is with this season, you had a very, very good idea Donegal were going to be there from the outset. Jim McGuinness, again, following the blueprint that he followed in his first term as Donegal manager. The second year when he was there, they won the All Ireland, they finished the job, and now we're in our second year here and now. Ian Michael Murphy was leading the way back in 2012. He's leading the way now in 2025. He's still absolutely sensational. 6 points from him in that game. The reality is, again, as I was saying earlier on, this will be Kerry's most difficult test of the year. This will be Donegal's most difficult test of the year. And on top of that, the why in this game is fantastic. The why in this All Ireland final is huge. And I was saying that to Liam yesterday that, you know, when you're talking about a UFC fight, for example, you have the where, the when, the who, the what, and the why. But the why is the most important. If Donegal win, it's revenge for the All Ireland final of 2014, an All Ireland that a lot of Donegal people look back on as an All Ireland that they left behind them. It's also, you know, validation for Jim McGuinness. He's come back and he's done it again. Michael Murphy has come back and he's done it again, won another All Ireland title. If Kerry win, they shut a lot of people up for good. People that were absolutely hounding Jack O'Connor after the Meath game in particular, after the Cork game. They were not happy with the way in which they felt Kerry were going. Kerry went from being in crisis to just one game later against Armagh being favourites for the All Ireland in a lot of circles. And on top of that, Jack O'Connor's last managerial stint as Kerry manager finished in 2012. And who do you think the last team was that knocked Kerry out of that championship in 2012? Only Donegal and Jim McGuinness himself. So that's revenge for Jack O'Connor there as well. So the why coming in from both sides is huge, which sets up for an amazing contest.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian says here, Donegal to win the football final, Cork to win the hurling. Sean says by the time the final comes, Donegal won't have had a competitive game in nearly 2 months. I mean, I think the Monaghan, look, they were 7 points down versus Monaghan at half time. I know they won it comfortably in the end, but they did have to be at their best in that second half, you know, to kind of turn it around. And maybe they felt like they needed to be. But I do get what you're saying, though, to be fair. Gavin says probably a bit surprising Galway and Armagh aren't in the last 4 or 2, but fair play to Tyrone and Meath. Pretty poor, but great chance to get here again. And
I'm
yeah,
not
look,
surprised by Armagh, to be honest. Too surprised. Just that's not that's not a dig at Armagh themselves. It's just if you look at the history books, All
yeah,
Ireland, when you go through a famine, you don't go back to back. Even the great Limerick team, who are, in my opinion, have to be considered the greatest team of all time, are right up there. They won in 2018 and fell off the wagon in 2019. Dublin, under Jim Gavin, won in 2013, fell off the wagon in 2014 after winning in 2011 under Gilroy, falling off the wagon in 2012. You usually win one, take a step back, and then if you are a truly era-defining team, like Kerry in the 80s and the 70s, doing that 4 in a row under Mick O'Dwyer, like Kilkenny under Brian Cody, you usually have to win one, lose it, and then come back again and do your 4 in a row, 3 in a row. That is usually the way that it goes. Jim McGuinness himself with Donegal, what happened to them in 2013? They were all over the place that year compared to the team they were the year before. There's so many examples of it. And I just thought, going off the history books, I there's a clear pattern there, and I wasn't 100% sure that Armagh were going to be able to break it. Now, definitely, my mind changed a bit when I saw how good they were in the group stages, coming up to Croke Park and beating Dublin like it was nothing. I was like, okay, I think Armagh are legit here, but Kerry absolutely took them to the cleaners that day.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, only two teams have gone back to back since what, the 90s. Kerry and
Yeah.
was 06, 07, and Dublin 6 in a row team. So going back to
So
back, it very happens very, very rarely.
even the great Tyrone team under Mickey Hart couldn't do it.
Yeah, and that says it all as well, because they were one of the best teams. The team of the 2000s, as people like to refer to them, and they probably were, to be fair. Brian says David Clifford and Shawnee O'Shea have scored 55% of Kerry scores in the championship this year. Yeah, that's quite the statistic. And yeah, look, breaking down the Kerry game, it was 120. Tyrone 17 points, as we very well know. It was an interesting game because, like, I thought Tyrone actually started the game quite well. There were 4 points to 1 up. Kerry couldn't win a kick out. They were really, really struggling to kind of gain the dominance in the game. And it was interesting. David Clifford scores his first point, in around the 16th, 17th minute. And it was actually after that, really, that Kerry started to dominate and started to kind of take over the game, and really sort of never look back after that. Tyrone had a few spells here and there and a few moments, but once Kerry got going, there was no stopping them. And again, it's the David Clifford show once more, 1-9 in total.
Yeah, no, David was absolutely fantastic, and he deserves all the plaudits that he gets in terms of being a generational player. But we also have to give a massive shout to Joe O'Connor there at midfield as well. I thought he was absolutely fantastic in this game. One player of the match, absolutely fully deserving of it. Look, the reality is, in this game, I was the same as you. I saw Tyrone start and they were leading at the end of the first quarter, and I was thinking this is going to be a good game. Like, Tyrone are going to get stuck into them just as I imagined that they would. And on top of that, you're looking at the players that got on the score sheet: on McAhome, Kieran McGeary, key operators for Tyrone when they're on it, and you're thinking, okay, Tyrone have turned up here ready to play. It's not going to be a repeat of the 2023 All-Ireland quarter-final where Kerry absolutely blew Tyrone away. This is going to, be a serious contest. Clifford gets his goal on the 28th minute. You're thinking, okay, he took it really, really well. But let's be honest, Clifford made the perfect backdoor cut, but Mike Breen should have been confronted sooner. He should not have been allowed to get that close to the Tyrone goal. He was allowed to just absolutely slalom deep into Tyrone territory. Nobody confronted him early on. And then once Clifford made that backdoor cut, which he's so good at, the hand pass from Breen in, it was relatively simple to do. Clifford still finished it magnificently, but that was the initial part poor on the defensive side from Tyrone, that they didn't confront Mike Breen sooner. They let him get in deep to Tyrone territory without a glove being laid on him. But then from that point on, I thought Tyrone steadied the ship relatively okay. They go in at halftime, 3 points down. You're thinking they probably would have taken that. They've the win in the second half. O'Rourke will give them a good team talk there, rally the troops. But it was that third quarter again, the third quarter where they decimated Armagh. And then in the second half, after Tyrone, I think it was Derek Canavan did some damage in the early stages of the third quarter. But then when he scored the point after the 2-pointer, then there was nothing from Tyrone for about 22 minutes. And Kerry hit 9 points in a row. Like, outrageous dominance from Kerry. Just around the midfield, completely dominated, with Joe O'Connor absolutely running the show. And the quality of ball into Clifford was really, really good. And by God, his finishing was amazing as well. And they really, really put Tyrone to the sword, and especially that third quarter, and set themselves up to just kind of cruise home in first gear there in the last quarter. They didn't need to do much after that third quarter excellence. And the reality is that's back-to-back games now where Kerry have blown teams away in the third quarter, which makes it no coincidence. They are now a team similar to Dublin in the latter years of the Jim Gavin era, who would blow teams away in that third quarter, like Mayo, for example, in the 2019 semi-final. the third quarter blitz with Kerry is a very, very real thing. The interesting thing is it's also very real with Donegal. They did the exact same thing to Meath, which makes the third quarter in this All-Ireland final arguably the most important part of the game.
Yeah, and it was interesting because like it wasn't. I don't think they were as brilliant as they were against Armagh in the third quarter, but obviously that was. I mean, that was probably one of the best third quarters maybe of all time in Gaelic football. Like, it was incredible. And Tyrone had chances. Like Tyrone were responding with chances with shots, but they just weren't converting them. And if they had converted one or two of them, look, I still think Kerry win the game, but maybe the outlook of the game could have changed maybe ever so slightly. But look, we have to mention David Clifford. Obviously, there's been a lot of chat, a lot of talk over social media over the last couple of days in regards to whether he is the greatest of all time. I think when you look at the greatest footballers of all time, you look at Peter Canavan, who obviously was there and done it with Tyrone, one of the most skillful players I've ever seen, done it on the big occasion time and time again. Of course, you have to, if you're looking at some of the Dublin greats, you have to look at the likes of Bernard Brogan. You look at James McCarthy, Stephen Cluxton, these kind of lads. But where does David Clifford rank in your opinion in terms of the greatest of all time? I know it's a difficult one. Like myself and yourself, we probably weren't around for the Jack O'Shea, for the Pat Spillane, for these kind of players. But where, in your opinion, does David Clifford rank as the greatest footballer of all time? Because a lot of people are saying he is the greatest right now. But what do you think?
It's a really, really interesting and fun debate. There's no question about it. And as fans of the game, this is one of my favorite debates to have. And I think it's what qualities matter the most to you. What are the main things that you look for? Do you look for dominance over a long period of time? Because if you're looking for dominance over a long period of time in Gaelic football, you have to look to that Kerry team under Mick O'Dwyer and that Dublin team under Jim Gavin. Because like they were the ones that just collected All Ireland after All Ireland after All Ireland. Like Pat Spillane has 8 All Ireland medals. Mick Fitzsimons, Stephen Cluxton, they have 9 All Irelands. James McCarthy has 9 All Ireland medals. Like that is the type of dominance that is absolutely ridiculous. Brian Fenton as well came into the Dublin team in 2015 and only lost his first ever championship game in 2021. Not a year where he didn't win the All Ireland. He didn't lose a championship game for 6 years after joining the panel. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But if that's the metric you're using, you have to go off that. If you're going off pure skill, I think you have to look at Clifford in the conversation. You have to look at Peter Canavan. You have to look at players like Mikey Sheehy, who is just ridiculously skilled and talented. You have to look at players like Matt Connor from Offaly from the 80s, who was supposed to be, again, I'd never saw him play live, but you've seen the highlights, you've seen the full matches. Like, watch those 1982 All-Ireland final against Kerry, 1981 All-Ireland final against Kerry. Matt Connor, his talent for his time was incredible. Trevor Giles was another one that I used to always love his skill. Kieran MacDonald from Mayo was outrageously skillful. Dermot Connolly was outrageously skillful. So, and then leadership. Leadership is another one. Who is an icon for their county? Because then you got to throw in players like Michael Murphy. You got to throw in players like that. Like Anthony Tohill from Derry was a man mountain for them there in the 90s. Like, those are the type of players. Sean O'Neill from Down in the 60s has to be thrown in. Like, and then anyone from that team in the millennium. Like, anyone from that. Kevin Heffernan, Mick O'Connell. Like, we've opened up Pandora's box here. But I think when you look at David Clifford, there's no question about it. In his prime, I think you already have to consider his prime is as good as anyone's prime that I've seen.
Yeah.
Like, I definitely, because I wasn't alive to see players from the 90s, players from the 80s, 70s, 60s in their prime. I didn't get to see that. I've seen, I've watched back full matches, I've watched back highlights. But David Clifford in his prime right now is right up there as the best player I've ever seen. Like, I think Dermot Connolly in his prime is another one that stands out to me. Conor McManus in his prime is another one that stands out to me. But Clifford has to be right up there. Colin Cooper actually as well deserves a shout here. But there's so many to consider. But I really, really believe when it's all said and done, Clifford could be the greatest of all time. But to call him the greatest of all time at 26, in my opinion, is a bit too soon. And what's gas as well is he somehow manages to be simultaneously almost overrated and underrated. Do you
Yeah.
ever get that? Because whenever Kerry lose, Clifford could score like 9 points, and people would still say, "Where the hell was David Clifford in that game? He did nothing." Da, 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 da. And then when he has a masterclass like this, he's called the greatest of all time. He's one of the most talented of all time, and I would definitely accept someone saying that he is the most talented of all time. To call him the greatest of all time, I would say not yet, but when his career is finished, he might well be.
Yeah. And Peter says here in our lifetime, Clifford and yeah, like I think in our lifetime, absolutely. I think it's very hard to look past a player. Look, I remember Peter Canavan playing. I remember Colm Cooper playing. Dermot Connolly, as you said previously, like Dermot Connolly was an interesting one. Like in terms of skill wise, I've never seen a player live better. In my opinion, in terms of what he could do. But it was a weird one with Connolly where he could have games where he would go missing and other players would step up because Dublin were so good. Connolly didn't always have to be the main man or the main player. Do you know what I mean? And it would be very interesting to see like David Clifford in a, in Dublin 6 in a row team. Would he like, because the thing is as well is that,
Could you imagine that?
because the
Jesus
thing is as well
Christ.
is that like it's an interesting debate because David Clifford probably hasn't played with the same level of players that Brian Fenton has got to play with, that Con O'Callaghan's got to
It's
play
true.
with, Pat Spillane, Jack O'Shea, these kind of players have got to play with. He doesn't look. He has Sean O'Shea, who's an unbelievable forward, but I think the rest of the players around him are good players, but he's like levels and levels above. There's no question about that. And I think you probably do have to win. When it's all said and done, I think like what you said, I think having the All Irelands there. Look, there's been plenty of brilliant players who haven't won All Irelands, as you said, Conor McManus. Look at countless players down the years for Mayo, whether it be like Lee Keegan and Kieran McDonald, these lads. But to have the All Irelands to back it up, I think would cement the debate a little bit because it means that, especially if this Kerry team are going to win All Irelands, he's probably been, a big part of that. And he probably wins Footballer of the Year if they do win the All Ireland. Do you know that way? But look, it is an interesting debate, and the comments are definitely flying off here. Sean says somehow Gooch never won a Player of the Year award. Maurice Fitz is the greatest ever, but Clifford
Great show.
After winning his third Player of the Year this year. Yeah, absolutely. Maurice Fitz as well was a player that we didn't mention there. Gavin says, I think Dermot Early, Lee Keegan, Conor McManus, Kieran Whelan are in that conversation, but all Irelands are massive. And I think David Clifford might need to win one or two more. And Brian says Jack O'Shea, Ollie Morgan, Pat Spillane, Jimmy Kavanagh, Brian Mullins, Trevor Giles, Brian Stafford, Bernard Brogan, Alan Brogan, Dermot Connolly, Brian Fenton, Stephen Cluxton. And
it's hard not to say it's Stephen Cluxton.
Yeah, and it's a hard comparison as well, though, because like when you're looking at it's very hard to compare David Clifford and Stephen Cluxton as the best player of all time because they're obviously two different positions. Even comparing midfielders and forwards, do you know what I mean? It's a very hard kind of debate.
I will say this though, is Clifford is in a position where there's 3 people in the inside forward line. Let's be honest, if you were to pick your all-time team, let's say you pick your all-time team, you've got 6 forwards there. So even if you don't have Clifford as your first player in, you might have him as your second in or your third in that full forward line. But I would argue, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'll be called a delusional biased dub, but I genuinely believe the majority of GA fans, if they're selecting the all-time greatest Gaelic football team, Stephen Cluxton's the goalkeeper.
Oh, yeah.
But like to say that for one position, that's just where the competition there is so fierce. Like you've got goalkeepers like Rory Began, you've got goalkeepers like Niall Morgan. You know what I mean? Like you've got absolutely sensational keepers down through the years that you have to take into consideration. From a Dublin perspective, you have to look at legends there like John O'Leary, like Paddy Cullen that came before him. So many other keepers to consider over the years. And it's just not even considered. It's just like, no, Cluxton is the keeper for a lot of people. And I think he's been doing it for Dublin as long as I've been alive. He made his debut in 2001. I was born in 2001. I have no recollection of what life is like without the prospect of Stephen Cluxton potentially playing for the Dublin team. He's been so consistent, so reliable, and he revolutionized what goalkeeping could be. Like, he was the first one to come up and take the frees. He slotted over the free for Dublin to win their first All Ireland in 16 years in 2011. And then he made it a habit over the next couple of years. He always came up to kick those frees. His kick outs have been a massive, massive reason why Dublin had so much success over the last decade. The best example of it is that 2017 All Ireland semi final against Tyrone, where Tyrone pushed up on Cluxton's kickouts. He hit that boomer over the top to Niall Scully. Tyrone were forced to drop that blanket defense, that press on Cluxton. Then Dublin had Tyrone boxed in and went on to win the game handy. And Cluxton played a vital, vital part in that. Just look at how many teams tried to crack his kickouts and how few had any success with it. I think it's very hard to say it's not Cluxton, because I think what I was talking about there, when you're talking about leadership, how many times did Cluxton captain Dublin to an All Ireland title? When you're talking about dominance, how many All Irelands does Stephen have? 9 All Ireland titles. And I think he has something like 17 or 18 Leinster titles. when you're when you're talking about consistency, again, when you're talking about skill and talent, at his peak, there was no question about it. He was the best keeper in Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah.
For year in, year out, across all things, he was the best shot stopper. Probably 1 or 2 years you could have said it was David Clark, and maybe Beggan and Morgan challenged him on the kickouts there at the latter stage of his career. But I think Pete Cluxton from around, I'd say 2007 to 2020 maybe with Cluxton. I'd say that era, he was the best for 13 years there, easy. And I think it's very hard not to say it's him.
100%. And even he had 23 as well, coming back in 23. And, he goes and slots a point over in the All-Ireland final versus Kerry, steps up first point.
Like it's nothing.
Over the bar. Yeah, like he hasn't been away anywhere. But no, I think, look, if you were to say who's the greatest of all time now, it would be between Cluxton, Fenton and Canavan for me. Very, very hard to call it between them three. I probably would go with Cluxton. Who would be your top? Who would be your top three and your number one?
I think Cluxton, Fenton, and can I give a top 5 instead?
Yeah. Why not? Why not?
I would go Cluxton in no particular order. I think I'd go Cluxton, Fenton, because this is specifying on what I personally right now, right here in this moment, I look at the greatest of all time as like dominance. Like, just over a decade, you just hoovered up everything that was there to be won. You won every All Ireland, you won every provincial title, you left nothing to be questioned. That you were the best of not just that era, but the next era and the era before and everything like that. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, Stephen Cluxton was playing in a Dublin team that won the All Ireland in 2011 and then also won the All Ireland in 2023. Like, consistency as well. Like, Mick Fitzsimons marked Colin Cooper in the 2011 All Ireland final at 20 years of age, and did a great job with him. And then at 34 years of age in 2023, he marked David Clifford. And did a great job on him. So that's consistency. Like, if we're talking one of the best defenders of all time, Mick Fitz for me is right up there. But anyway, I would say Cluxton has to be in there in the top 5. I would say Fenton has to be in there in the top 5. Peter Canavan has to be in there in the top 5. Mikey Sheehy for me has to be in there. Revolutionised what a skillful inside forward was, and his impact on the game is just immeasurable. Do I put David in? He's right there. But because I find it very hard once you read up on. There's one person directly in contention with him here, Sean O'Neill from Down. Once you read up on Sean O'Neill, you see how important he was. Leading man up top for Down. I know they were captained by Kevin Musson, but Sean O'Neill was also huge, and that was the first team to bring the Sam Maguire across the border into Northern Ireland. That's an icon. You know what I mean? Like, that's someone who is immeasurable in terms of his impact in the game, but in terms of skill, I'd be happy to put, because it's so hard to not put Michael Murphy in.
Yeah, it's to be honest, it's impossible really to answer it. Like, it's why it is the impossible debate. And as Peter says, it's very subjective. It is, do you know what I mean? And ultimately, like, look, someone who's watched Gaelic football in the 80s and 90s, week in, week out, will have a completely different opinion probably to us. Like, I'm going off of the basis of what I've seen. It's impossible for me to say Pat Spillane. I know I've seen highlights and everything else, but it's just, you'd be bluffing really if I was to say that. Like,
yeah, the thing, because I used to work in the GA museum, so I was surrounded every day when I was working there by the highlights up on the screen and everything like that. And you watch Mikey Sheehy, just the way he played, the way he moved. In the 70s, he was in the modern era, he would have been tearing it up as well. Like, he was so skillful, his balance was unbelievable, and then up here as well, his IQ for the game was just off the charts. For me, Cluxton is my greatest of all time in terms of consistency, dominance, leadership, skill, talent. I think he has to be there. Because I think they're the names. Like, Kieran McGeeney's a great shout as well. I think it's between Clifford, Michael Murphy, Colin Cooper, Morris Fitz, and maybe Trevor Giles as well for that last spot. Diarmuid Connolly maybe has to get a shout there too, but I've already gone with 2 dubs. Because people forget as well, Trevor Giles won Footballer of the Year twice, 96 and 99. Like, it's very hard to not say he deserves to be in there. I'll go, my top 3 is Cluxton, Fenton, and probably Peter Canavan. So I agree with you. But then number 4 is Mikey Sheehy. 5 I'm not going to say. Because I can't. It's too hard. But to answer your question on Clifford, I know we went down the rabbit hole there. But to answer your question on Clifford, right now at 26, I would say not the greatest of all time yet for me. But because my priority is dominance. My priority is, like, how many All-Irelands did you win? Did you clean up everything in front of you? Not just in, like, the first era that you arrived in, but in the next era as well. Did you beat challenger after challenger after challenger? And were you always leading the way? And Cluxton, for example, always was leading the way for Dublin in terms of his leadership, professionalism as captain. But by the time that Clifford is finished, I think he could very well be the greatest of all time, because you're talking leadership. The guy was captained when he was, 20 years old for Kerry? Yeah. Was he 19 for Kerry that year in 2019 when he was named captain? He's captain very, very young anyway, and led from the front for Kerry. He won an All-Star in his first year on the senior team in 2018. He's handled such expectations unbelievably well. He's led from the front for Kerry for every year, and this year as well. This year could be, if Kerry win the All-Ireland, there's no doubt he's going to have a major impact in that final. This year could be one that we look at in future as a very shining year as to why he is, when it's all said and done, considered the greatest of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe one thing to finish up on that point, Shane says here, when Clifford is on form, it's like he's playing against children. And that is the thing. Like, he makes some of the best in the game look very ordinary.
He got 1 point, I remember, against Mayo in the league final a couple of years ago when O'Hora was having the back and forth with him. But I remember watching Pádraig O'Hora for one of Clifford's points. Clifford got it, held it with the right hand while holding O'Hora off with his left hand. And O'Hora stuck to him like glue. And Clifford worked, a millimetre of space, and snapped it over the bar from the sideline. And he got a similar point against Derry, against Christy McCaig, where he managed to work an inch and managed to shoot over. And both times, I remember being like, "Fucking hell!" Like, what do you do? What can you do in those situations? Both of the defenders did everything by the book, and just wasn't enough. He's outrageous, and his prime, I think, has to be considered one of, if not the greatest prime that we've ever seen.
Absolutely. And in and amongst all the debates about best footballers of all time, Gaelic Statsman just comes in here and says up Donegal. There we go. Our good friend Matthew there, very much wearing his. I expect him to be in a full Donegal kit for the All Ireland final. If he's not out celebrating Cork or crying, or crying, misery tears after losing, we'll see what happens. Obviously, during the week. But maybe just before we finish up on this game, Tyrone, like they've obviously had a brilliant year, as a whole, like in terms of the under-20s and the minors. They don't quite get the treble, but look, they've had tremendous amount of underage coming through. They've young players. You saw glimpses of the young players as well, like Shawnee O'Donnell, on McElhone in particular, like in the opening, like 15 minutes, looked very, very lively. So they have young players coming through. They have stars coming through. So there is positivity there, do you think? Or could Tyrone, because I have seen some people say, like, and a few commenters have said Tyrone are poorly coached. Maybe, very inconsistent this year. They haven't quite brushed off the inconsistencies maybe from the last couple of seasons, but there is a conveyor belt of talent coming through there. There's no question about it.
Oh, without question. Tyrone are sitting on a gold mine in terms of talent. And the reality is they remind me a lot of Tipperary in the hurling a couple of years ago. Like, I know Tipperary have got to the All-Ireland final this year, so it's probably not the best time to pick that. But remember in the previous years that Cahill seemed like it was finding it difficult to strike the balance between, bringing through the likes of Andrew Orme, bringing through the likes of Darren McCarthy, and then sticking with the likes of the McGraths, the Mars, and players like that, and sticking with the more established members of the team versus going with the youngsters. And this year he's really got behind the Darren McCarthy's, the Andrew Ormans, and they've blended really, really well with the more senior established members of the team in years gone by. So Tyrone can definitely look at that and how to strike the balance between the Owen McElhomes, the Rory Canavans, the Shea O'Hares, and then the players like Maddie Donnelly, Peter Hart, Kieran McGeary, players that are more established in the team over the last few years. The reality is Tyrone have a conveyor belt of talent that every county would only dream of. Like an All-Ireland under-20 win and an All-Ireland minor win in the same year. It's not slowing down. These players are still coming through at a rapid, rapid rate. The reality is their consistency this year has been really, really poor. Like in the league, their consistency was really poor. They finished with 7 points and still managed to get relegated, which showcased how competitive Division 1 was, but also showcased that in getting relegated, Tyrone are probably going to bounce straight back up next year. And in my opinion, they're going to win Division 2 as well, if they get their cards right. But the reality is that they need to nip this inconsistency in the bud. Because in this season, they start off the championship, good win against Cavan, then they push Armagh all the way and show their All-Ireland credentials in that game, lost by a point to that late Rory Grugan free. And I'd been saying since the start, Tyrone, in my opinion, are dark horses for the All-Ireland. I was so confident in saying that after they went away to Donegal and beat them. And then they played Mayo at home and they were absolutely shite. And I couldn't figure out how that team had just gone away to Donegal and beat them and then had looked so beatable just the next day out against Mayo. Then they put on an absolute tour de force against Cavan. Really, really impressed against Dublin. You're thinking they're peaking at the right time here. They start well against Kerry. You're thinking this is going to be a hell of a game. And in the second half, they were just flat. And I don't really understand what more you need to get motivated. It's an All-Ireland semi-final against Kerry. Like in Croke Park, placing the final up for grabs. It just didn't seem like they were willing to go to the levels that Kerry were willing to go to in order to get over the line here. Now, the thing is, Tyrone will win, in my opinion, with this crop if they get it right. And O'Rourke definitely is a manager who could get it right. But I think Tyrone, in this next decade, if they get it right, I think they win at least 3 All-Irelands. And I'm confident in saying that. You look at the crop, look at the talent that they have. Look at the success they've had at under 20 level with All-Ireland after All-Ireland after All-Ireland, Ulster after Ulster after Ulster. And on minor level, they're winning the All-Ireland again, the double at the juvenile level. It's freakish the amount of talent they have coming through. And if they get it right, it's a matter of how many can they win rather than if they will win one. They will. It's only a matter of time, in my opinion, if they get it right. But O'Rourke needs to cut out that inconsistency because that's been their Achilles heel since they won the All-Ireland in 2021. Since then, they have been as inconsistent as the weather in Ireland. And he needs to cut that in the bud and make them consistent. I think a perfect example of it is Cork and the hurling. Cork were inconsistent at the start of the 2020s. They would be great one day, very, very flat the next. I think Cork over the last 2 years under Pat Ryan have been way more consistent, and that's why you see them now starting to get to the level that they should have been at.
Yeah. Gavin says here, losing a prelim last year compared to getting to a semi this year is a lot more consistent. This isn't perfect, but it's the best we've seen from Tyrone since 2021. And Gail Statsman says here, the last county to win under 20 and minor double was Cork. Look at them 6 years later. Not obvious they are going to dominate. It is an interesting point. I mean, obviously Tyrone have won back-to-back under 20s. Do you know the way? So that's more so what I'd look towards, obviously, because the minors are still, you know, like they still have to play 20s themselves. So there's still kind of a good bit away for them more so. And I think as well, like when you're a team that's kind of already playing at the highest level and you're bringing in these young players, you're not rushing them through. The standards are already really, really high. I think it makes the younger players better. I think that's why we've seen sometimes with the so-called lesser counties, like even with Kildare like had an under 20 All-Ireland team, I think in 16. Do you know, a few of those lads made the breakthrough, but a lot of them didn't. Do you know what I mean? And I think it depends on the standard sort of around the county. You know, but it'll be interesting to obviously see with Tyrone over the next couple of seasons. Moving on to the other game, it was Donegal 326, Meath 15 points, as we were saying. Certainly not expecting Donegal to win out as comfortably as they did. And again, very similar game. Like Meath started very, very well. Very ambitious, very fearless. Brilliant early 2-pointer from Owen Frayne. You know, Meath were backing themselves. They were shooting. They were getting chances wide, but you admired the confidence. And I think maybe a very confidence-based team, because as soon as the going did get tough in the second half, they were a complete shell of themselves. And what was, you know, easy points for them, really, they weren't able to kind of put over. But look, the credit has to go to Donegal, because if Kerry's performance versus Armagh a couple of weeks ago in the second half was one of the best of all time, then surely Donegal's in the second wasn't far off. Like I think 2 or 3 wides in the second half. As Matthew was saying in the group chat yesterday, 80% accuracy. Yeah. So, you know, like that's some going.
That's scary efficient. Yeah, no, Matthew threw that in, and I remember just being like 80%. Like that is, you're getting punished for basically every mistake that you make. You're getting punished for basically every unforced error. And Donegal were just in imperious form, and Meath were rattled in that second half. They had no answer for them. And look, it was disappointing. Obviously we can kind of relate to this in terms of like Meath have had an amazing year with a bad end. Like I likened it on my pod yesterday with Liam. I likened it to how the Dublin Hurlers season has gone. That it's been a really bad end. You know, it's a very, very bad semi-final defeat. But all in all, a very good year where you can see the progress that's been made. You can see the confidence that's been brought into the county. You can see with a manager in his first season, Robbie Brennan and Neil O'Callaghan respectively, you can see a project that is worth backing. You can see a manager there who can build something with your county, and Meath need to get behind Robbie Brennan, because in my opinion he's absolutely the right man for the job. And the other thing as well is this year showcased what a sleeping giant Meath have been in terms of their impact on Gaelic football, the crowds that they brought to the games. Like they have really travelled in droves and got behind their team, and combined with Donegal to pack out Croke Park the way that they did, it was unbelievable. And living where I live, quite close to Croke Park, like, you know, whenever teams come down, I get a decent sense for how teams travel. Meath were definitely one that caught my eye this year in terms of how they got behind their team. Donegal have always been like that. Donegal always travel in droves. Armagh as well, Mayo, Wexford, like they always travel in droves, those counties. I'm probably missing out a few, but yeah, Donegal and Meath were always going to pack that place out. 2 very, very loyally followed counties. And in the first half, it was kind of teed up where I still thought Donegal would win. It did look to me like Meath kind of had like a puncher's chance. I was like, you know what? If the last 10 minutes is just crazy, maybe Meath can just rattle Donegal. And yeah, maybe it can just be a smash and grab. But I was like, if this game is controlled, and that was what was very clear in the first half, was Donegal were like just controlling that game as much as they could. They were just slowing it down at every opportunity, not letting any momentum be built up, and then being very, very, very selective of when they took the shot on. There was one point where Michael Langan got in the first half, and I remember 3 different Donegal players had an opportunity, a very obvious opportunity to shoot, and they passed up on it, worked the ball to Langan over the bar. And whereas then Meath were taking snapshots down at the other end, Owen Frayne was trying the 2-pointers and everything like that. And look, that's, you have to admire their bravery. And we can't now sit with hindsight analysis and say he shouldn't have gone for it. He's been doing it all year and he was absolutely right to take them on. But it was clear that Donegal were going to try and manage this game out. And then in the second half, they put the burners on. And once that goal went in from Gallen, I just remember being like, that's done.
Yeah.
Once they got, because Donegal had been controlling the game so much up until that point. When they got the goal, I was like, there's no way you're going to get them. Because Donegal don't play fast and loose. Do you know what I mean? They don't play Russian roulette. They're not going to go punch for punch with you. Like, it's like if Donegal are a UFC fighter, they're not the type that stand in the middle and go punch for punch with you. Like they are going to manage the game out, and they are not going to let you run up momentum on them. And once the goal went in from Gallen, I was like, this is done. And then the second goal goes in from Kieran Moore, and then finally the third one goes in from Conor O'Donnell. And by that point, it's a turkey shoot. And look, for me, it's a very disappointing end to what has been a really, really good year for them. And Donegal looked really, really intimidating in the second half. Like, that was a statement performance by Donegal, and it's very, very hard to call a winner between them and Kerry.
Yeah, it is, and the like I was saying early in the preview, you might nearly need to do 2 shows on the build up to that because, geez, there's so much to kind of go through, from matchups to storylines to how the game might go. And I've seen a good few people kind of saying it could be a replay as well. Like, obviously it would need to go to extra time, and then there for there to be a replay as well. Like, that's definitely possible.
I think it goes to extra time, but I don't think it goes to replay. I think usually in extra time, you get a winner.
Yeah, maybe with the new rules as well, like, because it's like we have seen less draws this year, haven't we? With the new rules, and it's because there's so much on the line. Yeah, it's a hard one to know, but look, one thing that was being discussed on social media as well, interesting enough, was Michael Murphy. He obviously, look, he was outstanding. There's no question about that. That 2-pointer he kicked with the ball being curled in. I've seen a lot of people mention though that he's, our good friend John was mentioning him being, highly protected by officials and everything else. Obviously, and I think a lot of people are referring to the moment between himself and Sean Rafferty where it was he sort of jumped into him. I don't really know, like, whether, like, I think it was a yellow. Look, I seen some people say it definitely wasn't a red card, black card. I don't know if it was intentional or not. Like, you need to kind of watch the replay back, but where do you stand on all that?
On Murphy, in terms of, is he like?
Yeah, like obviously John was saying that, and plenty of others were saying it as well, in terms of him being like highly protected and getting away with all sorts kind of on the pitch, and he dishes out heavy hits and doesn't seem to get punished for it. Like, where do you stand on that?
I always stand fairly neutral on things like this, and try and take any county biases out of it and stuff like this. But the reality is Murphy is, again, it's kind of similar to players like Clifford, players like Shane Walsh, stuff like that, where Green O'Neill, etc., where there's an obvious target on his back every game he goes into play. Every game that he goes into play, every game Michael Murphy has played, probably, let's be honest, since he was a child, he's probably had someone man mark him. He's probably had someone being prepped to mark him. And he has had some rough days in terms of man markers. Like, let's not forget, Aidan O'Mahony did an absolute hatchet job on him in the 2014 All-Ireland final. Just followed him around, basically beating him up for the whole game. And the reality is that every top-class player is going to be singled out for a bit of targeting and man marking and some underhand tactics, regardless of what team it is. And that's not me having a go with Aidan. That's not me having a go with Kerry. Every team does it. Every team has their players that are willing to colour outside the lines and go that extra mile and cross lines in order to get over the ultimate line for their team to win the big prizes. That's just the way that sports has been. The cross sport. You have your Dennis Rodmans in basketball, your Sergio Ramoses in football, like players that are willing to go that extra mile that other players maybe aren't. And those players often go after the Michael Murphys, the Shane Walshes, the David Cliffords. And that's why these players have to develop a rough edge to them, because they have to protect themselves. They have to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and not need people to protect them. And often players like that who are also fantastic are capable of dishing out the hits themselves. Like, let's
Mm.
not forget, like, we've seen plenty of examples. Murphy has flattened plenty of players in his day, not just Sean Rafferty. David Clifford, I remember one time absolutely flattened Shane McGuigan in the semi-final against Derry a couple of years ago. Like, they give it and they take it. And Murphy is, I would say, just as culpable of getting involved in that stuff as any other player in the game. I wouldn't say he's dirtier than anybody else, but I also wouldn't say that he is completely innocent. I think he definitely does cross the line sometimes with his tackles. They're very, very hard hitting, but I would not say he's a dirty player. He's definitely not a dirty player. He hits you hard, and I
Mm.
definitely wouldn't like to be on the receiving end of a shoulder from him. But he's a guy who, in my opinion, plays the game fair. And I think most of the players that have played against him, the way that they speak about him, you can tell that they respect him. And there are other players that I won't name who have done really nasty things on the pitch. Like, I'm talking, fish hooks in the mouth, eye gouges, things like that, like going for the balls and stuff like that.
Mm.
That type of stuff I've no respect for, and I've never seen Murphy do that. So he plays the game fair,
Yeah.
and he's the type of player that his opponents could probably sit in the pub and have a pint with him after the game and shake hands with him. Fair enough. Game's the game. And I think Sean Rafferty, for the record, is that type of guy. I think Sean Rafferty's not going to be sitting at home getting all buttered because he got a hard hit from Michael Murphy. I think he's going to be like, fair enough, because Rafferty's
Mm.
probably ran through a lot of players in his time as well. So, yeah, Murphy is a hard man to play against. He's a hard hitter, but in my opinion, he plays the game fair.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you there. Yeah, like, and you saw like Rafferty did get up after a couple of minutes, to be fair, and it was a heavy, a heavy challenge. And I do agree with you as well. I think it is probably, you have a lot of these supporters probably are supporting neighbouring counties in Ulster, Armagh, Tyrone, these kind of, they obviously don't want to see Donegal be successful. And there probably is a bit of a target on Murphy's back. We saw similar, people say similar things about Rian O'Neill. It's happened with plenty of Dublin footballers down the years. Maybe some of it is justified, but certainly with some players, I would say it's not justified. But yeah, this definitely has happened quite a lot, to be fair. And I don't think anyone's doubting his ability and his talent, because even some of the points he kicked, especially at the start of the game as well, was absolutely out of this world. Peter was saying here as well, Murphy pulled up when he went down for the ball after 45 minutes. Yeah, it was interesting when he was taken off, and bringing on for Passion with Bertie. They were saying in commentary that, I think Enda McGinley was making the point that that's the game. McGuinness thinks the game is done and dusted. 25 minutes to go. It was only like 7 points at that stage. I definitely don't think that was the case. And I was listening to McGuinness in his interview on RTE, and he was asked a question about Murphy, and he just skipped completely over it and didn't mention it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what maybe happens in regards to that. Stephen says here, Finbar Rorty has to be given Young Footballer of the Year, win or lose in the final. Mad how he looks like he's played for Donegal for 10 years. Yeah, I mean, he's a serious footballer, and it's mad to think, like, you remember that time a couple of years ago, was it when I think Jim McGuinness played Finbar Rorty in like a pre-season game or something like that, and there was a lot of, I can't remember what it was. There was loads of fuss over or something. I tell you what, you can see why he was in a rush to get this man in the team, because this is a serious player, serious cornerback. Like that turnover for the second goal. And I agree with some of the other commenters in there as well. Vintage Donegal player, looks like he's been around the block for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty much, a chip off the Michael Murphy block, the Kevin Cassidy block, in terms that, they're in the team at 19, 18, and they look like they've been in there for their entire lives. Like, he is an absolutely gifted footballer. You can see why McGuinness was desperate to get him into the team as quick as possible, because his defending is superb, but then also his counter-attacking, his pace, his fitness as well is off the charts. He really is like that Owen Bond Gallagher, Padder Morgan type, that he can defend really well, but by God, then he can bomb forward. And yeah, Pat says it there, like, that caused a lot of controversy, but when he's in the team now this year, he's a shoe in my opinion, for Young Player of the Year already. Regardless of what happens in the final, I think he has to get that award because he's been fantastic. Donegal, I think Liam was saying this. I don't know if Liam's still watching. Maybe Matthew will have the stat as well. But Donegal have won 9 championship games this year, and that's the most that they've, I think, ever won. Or I'm not
Probably
sure
is,
if,
yeah.
yeah, they're like. But in terms of
Probably
like,
is.
I'm not sure if it's the most that anybody's ever won, or I don't
Mm.
know. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Matthew, if you're watching, if you can help me out here, but yeah, something crazy like that they've just been on such a journey, and the only slip up they've had was against Tyrone at home. They've been unbelievable, and look, in that second half, when Meath were still there with them, they put them away, left no doubt. And the other thing as well was they looked kind of similar to Dublin at their peak, Limerick at their peak, that they just don't give a shit that you've kind of thrown in the towel. They're ruthless. They keep the foot on the gas, and they try and rack up the score as much as possible. Ruthless, determined winners, and by God, I can't wait for the final, man. I cannot wait for that final.
Yeah, and interesting. Like Stephen was saying here as well, Clifford versus McCall will be interesting. You think he will maybe pick up Michael Murphy as well. Who's Finbar Rorty going to go
I
on?
think Tig Morley will take him.
You think so? Yeah.
And maybe either Tig Morley. It depends if they want to keep Jason Foley in around the square as well, because Foley's actually very comfortable.
Yeah, I would have thought Foley personally, but
It
yeah,
might be, but Morley maybe is a little bit more comfortable being out around the
yeah,
field.
kind of being out, yeah, because Murphy does drift quite a lot, doesn't he? So that could work. Yeah,
Could we
I don't
get
know.
Jack
Like,
Barry coming back into the panel first?
no, it's going to be interesting as well. Like even thinking Jim McGuinness, like is he going to come up with some mad plan for David Clifford? Is he just going to let him be and sort of call his bluff and say, you know what, let's just focus on what they do, on what Donegal do? I mean,
No,
it's
Clifford's
because
gonna hammer
because
them.
the thing is, Clifford's so good that if you put so much focus and attention on him, like you saw what Armagh, Sean O'Shea, and the influence he had. There was so much emphasis on Clifford. Like Armagh actually did a pretty good job on Clifford up for about 40, 45 minutes. But Sean O'Shea was doing so well that all of a sudden, and then once Armagh started getting pulled left, right, and centre, it was just free for all. Clifford was getting the space then. So it's Jesus, yeah, I don't know. I think Jim McGuinness will have
Pick your poison.
I think he was talking before about time on the training pitch and everything else. Jeez, he might want to be spending even more time trying to figure that one out.
I think we could see. I think McCall will go on Clifford for sure. I think you might see even. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Rorty go on to Sean. See Finbar Rorty go on to Shawnee O'Shea.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that as well. Yeah, possibly.
Because he's
Yeah.
very, very comfortable around the half back line midfield area where Shawnee likes to drift. And then if he goes into the full forward line, which Shawnee tends to do sometimes, Rorty will also be grand there. So I think that's probably the matchup that we'll see. It's a very, very, big task to give a young lad, but we've seen that McGuinness has the faith in him. I think that's probably, right now in this moment, obviously I'll do more research on the final and listen to different interviews, pick up some little bite-sized information that I can get. But the reality is, God knows, because McGuinness won't tell you nothing. He won't let anything out. And I think Jack will be relatively the same. We'll find out on the day. And the other thing is as well is that when you're previewing the final, there's always the element of the unknown. Like 2019 final between Dublin and Kerry is always a great example of that because 20 minutes in, Johnny Cooper was sent off. You're like, well, who would have predicted that would have happened? And things like that. So the unknowns of a red card, an injury, like if Clifford or Michael Murphy goes off injured in the first half, like the script is completely flipped. So we can break it down. I have to be honest. I picked Donegal to win the All Ireland from the very beginning of the year, so I probably will shade it to them to win. And I think one of the main reasons that I'll give, to be honest, without getting too much into it, but one of the main reasons that I give is I truly, truly believe that this is going to go to the last minute. This is going to go to extra time, and the second half of extra time, I think the teams will be level at halftime and extra time. I think when it comes down to those moments, you are going to need to bring your reserves in. You're going to need to bring your substitutes on. And when you look at the two benches, I think Donegal have a stronger bench. Kerry have been very good off the bench so far this year. Killian Spillane, Micheál Burns, but I think Donegal's is better. I think Darrow Boyle, Patrick McBrearty, Jamie Brennan, like players like that coming in, it's frightening. Quayle McGonigal as well is absolutely superb, and he doesn't even start. Like Donegal will have the strength and depth, in my opinion, in that second half of extra time to shade by the minimum.
Yeah, and even as well when you were talking about sort of matchups and everything else, like remember Aidan O'Shea on Kieran Donaghy as well. So who would have ever predicted that one? Like you just don't know sometimes, and sometimes that these things can work. Sometimes they can be moments of madness, overthinking, maybe from management teams. I would be very, very interested to kind of see, because there'll definitely be a few things thrown in there that we absolutely don't.
The biggest one that nobody would have predicted, actually, the biggest one that nobody would have predicted was that 2012 All Ireland final that Mayo would be happy to leave Michael Murphy 1-on-1 in the penalty box in the first 15 minutes. Still can't get over that one. Absolutely crazy decision.
Yeah, well, that's Mayo for you. Gavin says Mayo in 2017 went on a long run with replays close to 10 wins, maybe. And Gaelic Statsman does say 8. Technically, Armagh game went to extra time. 9 would be the most ever. Depends on your perspective.
If they win the All Ireland, then if they win the All Ireland, then most wins ever in a championship season and All Ireland champions. It's quite the sign off for Michael Murphy if he decides to go again.
100%. Yeah, well, it will be interesting to see how it goes in the final. And look, we'll have plenty of time to discuss and preview it and call predictions and everything else when that game comes around. The Tailteann Cup final was Kildare 124, Limerick 219. Turned out to be the closest game of the weekend in the end, although Kildare looked to have the game kind of dead and buried going into the final couple of minutes. They were actually 4 up with about 2 or 3 minutes to go, and in the end, a massive save from Cian Burke to deny Limerick a goal that would have sent the game to extra time. But a very entertaining game, you would say. Definitely one of the probably the game of the weekend, maybe in terms of competitiveness. But yeah, I think the most important thing for Kildare was just to get over the line. And I suppose you'd feel sorry for Limerick because they came so close, but yet so far. But look, ultimately, I think the future of Limerick football under Jimmy Lee is definitely in good steads.
It is in good stead, and the thing is as well is you have to give Jimmy Lee massive credit because he's arrested the tide of falling backwards that had set in after the departure of Billy Lee. Like Billy Lee was in there, Limerick had got back-to-back promotions up to Division 2. I'm not sure if it was back-to-back actually. I think they might have missed out a year and then gone up the year after. But anyway, they went from Division 4 to Division 2 under Billy Lee. They were making massive strides. And then when Billy Lee left, they had back-to-back relegations down to Division 4. And it looked like it was kind of all the good work was unraveling right in front of them. But Jimmy Lee has got the whole group back in. He's got the likes of Danny Neville back in. He's got the likes of Ian Corbett back in. And they have been really, really good this season. And they've taken to the new rules really, really well. Division 4 champions and making it to a Tailteann Cup final is a very, very good year. Like Kildare are no joke. Kildare are a very, very good team, and for Limerick to push them all the way that they did, they can hold their heads high for sure. And like the reality is that last shot by O'Brien, like on another day, that goes into the back of the net at the end there, and Kildare don't hold them off, and that was the grain of rice that tipped the scale in the favour of Kildare. So looking at it from a Kildare perspective, then, the thing that was most impressive for me about Kildare is the calmness that they showed when they were under pressure. So that second goal that goes in for Limerick, on 48 minutes, I think it was Fahy who got that one for Limerick. And in that instance, it's very, very easy for Kildare to kind of hit panic stations. The momentum is with Limerick. We're losing here. What are we going to do? And then they respond by hitting 8 points in the next 15 minutes. Really, really impressive stuff by them in terms of how they handled that big pressure cooker moment. Players like McLaughlin off the bench, who again was fantastic. Derek Irwin, who won player of the match, was superb. They stood up in those key moments. Callum Bolton, I thought his return was really, really important as well. Captain Kevin Feely was superb. They stood up in the crucial stage of the game when the serious questions are being asked of them, and then Limerick threw everything at them at the last minute, and Kildare's defence held firm. And look, Brian Flanagan was definitely needing a bit of breathing assistance there at the last few minutes, but Kildare ultimately, I thought, were the worthy winners. And yeah, it's very interesting to see where they can go from this, because we've seen, Meath, for example, win the Tailteann Cup, kick on and get to an All-Ireland semi-final, beat Dublin, Galway and Kerry in the same year. We've seen what it did for our Meath football, that Tailteann Cup win. We've seen Down as well win the Tailteann Cup, and they've been competitive in every game that they played this year. They should have won quite a lot of them. You've seen as well Westmeath, like, winning the Tailteann Cup in 2022, even when they lose players like Heslan, like O'Toole, who are their key players, they're never not competitive in a game that they play, and they've been taking huge strides forward. So you see what a Tailteann Cup win does for the team. You see the pedigree there. And for Kildare to win this, it shows their trajectory is on the way up. And you look at the Leinster Championship next season, it's going to be very, very interesting, because Kildare's trajectory is definitely on the way up. Offaly's is definitely on the way up. You've got Westmeath there, who are very competitive in every game, as I was saying. Louth, who's to say Louth can't win it again? I mean, they barely took a step backwards when Mickey Hart left, so why not exactly the same under Ger Brennan? Meath as well will be gunning for that. Dublin will be gunning to get the Leinster title back. The most interesting Leinster Championship we've had probably since 2011.
Yeah, possibly even longer as well. When you think there's so many teams that you feel like are in the mix. But yeah, no, I think Leinster next year is going to be hugely competitive, and it will be interesting to see definitely Kildare's trajectory as well. What you said with the young players like Ryan Sinky and Callum Bolton, and these lads have obviously come through. You've had experienced players like Kevin Feely, Daniel Flynn, who've obviously been around the block for a while. Derek Irwin's still a young enough player himself, to be fair, but he's been in the in the panel for a good couple of years. So there's potential with Kildare. Like you've got players who can come off the bench as well. Brian McLaughlin, I thought, was very impressive there. So positive signs for Kildare football, and we certainly all hope that they can kick on. Gavin says you said Kildare won't be in a relegation battle the other day. Who goes down instead of them? You think? I think like Down last year. It could be tough to close the gap. It's very, very hard to call at this moment in time. It's a hard one to know. I think we'll have to see what happens with both Cavan and Louth. What managers do they get in? Will there be, could Cavan players retire? Could Louth players maybe step away? I think both of those two should have enough to stay up. Offaly are on an upward trajectory as well. It's hard to know. It really is hard to know. Kildare could very well go down, and we'll have to kind of wait and see when it comes around,
Yeah, I think there's no point trying to predict it now. I think that Division 2 has always been a shark tank. I think the only thing I would be confident about right now is that Tyrone will go up.
Yeah.
Tyrone will get promoted, but apart from that, no idea. I think it's probably between Derry, Meath and Cork for that second promotion place, but I have no idea.
So many Division 2 teams without a manager as well. Like Roscommon have no manager, Derry have no manager, Cavan, Louth.
Rossies are up. No, Rossies are in Division 1.
Oh, Rossies are up actually. Yeah, they got promoted. Yeah, forgot about that.
It's hard to. It usually slips the mind when they lose the final.
Yeah, I think it was just because they had that draw at the end, wasn't it? The kind of bad form. You kind of forget that, to be fair.
Yeah, they got promoted at the start of the league campaign, really, Roscommon.
There we are. But yeah, look, I think we'll go ahead and wrap that one up there. Peter was saying here, Kate Curran for Roscommon.
No.
Probably not. No, probably not. Here to say Horse Devlin tip for the Louth job as well. I'll be very interested. I did make a video last week.
Louth need to go with someone who will not go somewhere else. That's my advice for Louth.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned in the video I made last week, Mick Bohan could go to Louth. I think that would be a great appointment. Keeping on,
maybe, but like again, I don't really like it, because I experienced it very recently as a Dublin fan with Micheál Donoghue, where he was in don't get me wrong, he gave that job his all when he was there. But the minute Galway came calling, he's off.
He's gone, yeah. And it's
He's
probably
gone.
the same with Jared Brennan at the moment, if we're being
Like
honest.
we don't know which maybe he is just leaving, because the reality is maybe he just wants to go out on a high, as Leinster champions with Louth, and the reality is now he'll never have to buy a pint in Louth again, so long as maybe he doesn't go to Dublin. But the reality is like, when you leave yourself in that position, you are leaving yourself vulnerable to your manager leaving and going to your rival county. Like when Liam Cahill went from Waterford to Tipperary, and he was saying that he wasn't going to take it, and then he did take the job. I was like, what did you expect? This is like this was always going to happen. He was always going to want to manage his native county. He was always going to want to do that. If you are, in a situation where you are not quite at the top level, but you want to get up to the top level, like where Louth were when Mickey Hart picked them up, it made absolute sense to get Mickey Hart in, because he's a manager who was used to managing at Division 1 level. Louth are in Division 4. Mickey Hart is obviously going to elevate the standards when he's there. But my advice is to Louth, you're a solid Division 2 team. You're Leinster champions. Puff your chest out. Start acting like a big county now. Hire a Louth manager. Hire someone who is not going to jump ship to a different county. Because if Mickey Hart jumped to Derry, if Ger Brennan does go to Dublin, he might not, but if he does, fool me once, fool me twice, fool me 3 times. Dublin learned the lesson and went with Neil O'Callaghan as their next appointment. I think Louth need to learn the same thing, because then you are not vulnerable to your manager just getting swiped by their native county.
Yeah, I think that's the problem as well. And it's even like when you're looking at it, like in terms of like Fergal Reel's the manager of the Louth under-20s. Maybe he might be a man to come in there.
He could definitely be a shout. But the perfect example is
Paddy Keenan, maybe.
Paddy Keenan would be a very interesting show, a real dark horse for the position. But like, I remember saying this with Matthew. I was like, with Henry Shefflin, like when Galway made him manager, I was like, they're literally basically just writing a book of information on their players and giving it to Kilkenny. Because, like, do you really think that when Galway are playing Kilkenny, that it hasn't? I'm not saying anything. Obviously, this is just pure speculation. But like, if Derek Ling rang up Henry Shefflin and was like, who would you put on Evan Island? Who would you put on Conor Cooney? Do you see what I mean? It's like,
And look, to be fair, there probably is a bit of professionalism there, and I don't know if that.
Yeah, I doubt Henry's like ringing up Derek, being like, "Oh, this is what you should do." But
but if Henry Shefflin became the Kilkenny manager, obviously he's gonna.
It's very possible. It's very possible. And if Henry becomes the Kilkenny manager, he has a wealth of knowledge on all Galway's best players.
Yeah.
That you just can't buy. Like, do you know what I mean? That one was crazy. Could you imagine, like, because Galway are Kilkenny's direct rivals. Could you imagine, like, I don't know, could you imagine Donegal hiring, like, Kieran McGeeney? Or, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, like, and even like if, I don't know, Kieran Donaghy going to Dublin or something like that, that way, like something kind of mental like that. And then, he's going to go back to Kerry at some point. But yeah, no, look, I think we'll go and wrap it up here. Do let us know in the comments, lads, your opinions, your thoughts on the games. We'll be back during the week to preview the All-Ireland hurling final between Cork and Tipperary, and what a game that looks poised to be. Anyone who did tune in, if you could hit the like button and subscribe, helps the channel out. And yeah, if you could check out Seamus's podcast on Clifford as well, that will be much appreciated. And until the next one, speak to you all later.